All right, welcome back to Morning Live. Now, the Progressive Professionals Forum says it will write to the Finance Minister, Malusi Gigaba, to postpone the implementation of the Financial Intelligence Center Amendment, which is FICA. This comes after President Jacob Zuma signed the bill into law last weekend. But to talk to us more about this issue, we joined in our studios in Johannesburg by Mzwanele Manyi, who is the President of the Progressive Professionals Forum. Dr. Manyi, good morning to you and thank you so much for coming through.
Morning, Palisa, and good morning to your viewers.
Now, what is the problem this time around? I know that during the public hearings, you cited the unconstitutionality of this bill, and the President referred the bill back to Parliament, citing the very same concerns. What is lacking now?
Let's start by saying, for us as Progressive Professionals Forum, we join the fight against money laundering, we join the fight against financing of terrorism, we join the fight against tax evasion. So, at IDIM, with everyone that is fighting that. That's a starting point.
Okay.
But we think that the current bill or the current law now that has been signed continues to violate the constitutionality of South Africans. Number one, we find it very funny that this law, which is meant to fight terrorism, which is meant to fight financing of terrorism and money laundering, the very first thing that it does is to dissolve and abolish a council, an advisory council. This advisory council is a council that is meant to advise even the minister, to advise even the center, the FIC center, and everybody to make sure that there's no abuse of this law. So the very first thing is to abolish this thing. When you abolish this thing, it means that it gets replaced by the center in some of its functions. So in other words, we have a situation where instead of having this law supervised by people from different departments, remember this council is a council made up of everyone. National Treasury would have been there, SARS would have been there, Police would have been there, NIA would have been there, Defense Force would have been there, etc. Yeah. So these, Reserve Bank would have been there. These are the all credible institutions that were meant to be supervising this law. Now the next thing, the thing is abolished. So in other words, we have a situation where the powers of the security cluster have been taken away from the security cluster and they are being put into the center. Now our problem there is that the constitution of this country is very clear on this matter. Section 205, subsection 3 of the Constitution is very clear that when it comes to issues of criminality, investigating of crime and all that, that is the duty of the police. It's not the duty of the FIC inspectors. The old law understood this, the 2001 law, which was a better law than this. What we have now, in fact, is a shadow of the 2001 law. That law was very clear that whenever there's any criminality, that the FIC inspectors would pick up, they immediately report to the police. This one, when the FIC inspectors decide that something may not be where they consider, I mean, they make a value judgment on a criminality. Where do they get the power to consider criminal things and decide whether they take it or they don't take it? This is the problem, number one. Number two, the risk management, a blank check that accounting institutions are given, as in banks. Banks now have got a blank check to do their various risk management and programs. What that means is that banks now can decide how they profile their customers under the guise of due diligence. They will profile their customers. They decide if your behavior is what they want or don't want, and they can decide to even close your account even without referring it anywhere. And therefore, your right as a citizen of a fair hearing, your right to be heard, is actually immediately done away with.
But do you think that this bill is politically motivated?
Yes, very, very much so. It is politically motivated. The very first sign of the political motivation of this thing is the promulgation powers of the president that have been taken away from this bill. All other bills are promulgated by the president. The president signs it into law, promulgates it, takes date of effect. This one, the president's powers have been removed and replaced by the minister. So actually, if Thuli Madonsela was doing an investigation of this bill, she would have called it the private army. This is what it is. This was a private army. Minister of Finance, a former Minister of Finance, was the one that was going to be in charge of this thing. And as we sit here now, President has signed this thing, but it's still not law. It's still not effective up until the Minister of Finance actually gazettes this thing.
All right.
So it is in 2000.
I'm afraid we don't have enough time, but do you still share the same sentiments as you did previously, that it is aimed at bankrupting the ANC before the 2019 elections?
Exactly that, because what's going to happen is that what's going to happen is that the FIC can decide, the center can decide to freeze your account for 10 days. Now, everybody that is supporting, whether PPF or anybody that is not pushing what monopoly capital line, will be frozen. The accounts will be frozen under the guise of being investigated, and 10 days is enough to shut you down.
All right, all right. So what happens now? You're writing to the finance
minister? We have
minister?
already written to the finance minister to say that the powers of the Counter Money Laundering Council must be reinstated in order to bring some objectivity into this thing, to take away the private army arrangement that was that is embedded in this law. If that doesn't happen, as we speak here and now, we're briefing our lawyers in a council in parallel. We're actually headed for the Concord because we do not think that we should allow a bill to continue to be this unconstitutional.
All right. And Dr. Manyi, let's leave it at that for now, but this is an ongoing issue. I believe that we'll still be in conversation with. Thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.